I am Dr. Lisa Belisle, and you are listening to or watching Radio Maine, our video podcast where we celebrate creativity and the human spirit. And today I have with me really somebody I've known for such a long time, Carrie Levine, who, in addition to being a wonderful human, also is a certified nurse midwife and certified functional medicine practitioner and the founder of Whole Woman Health. And so exciting for me, the author of this lovely book that those of you who are watching on video can actually see. And this is Whole Woman Health, a guide to creating wellness for any age and stage. Thank you for coming in today.
Thank you for having me. It's so good to see you.
It's good to see you too. I feel like we intersected at this really pivotal point, which I think the last time I interviewed you back a couple of radio shows ago, I told everybody, but it bears repeating because it's a great story, that I was a young medical student resident and you were a nurse on labor and delivery. Yeah. And I was obviously scared out of my mind with all these laboring women who, it got very intense at times. You were this calming influence and just great at kind of helping bring me along as a practitioner. I mean, and I love the fact that you have just continued to evolve as your own practitioner along your lifespan professionally. Yeah. And that you and I kind of keep bumping up against each other. Like, oh, here you are again. Hi, Carrie. Good to see you.
I know. Concentric circles. It's pretty lovely.
Yes.
My time at Maine Med when I was a nurse was like my crash course in high-risk obstetrics. And the nurses there were so not happy to have me because they knew I was going to be a midwife, and they were cranky that I hadn't done med surg for a couple of years. And so the nurse who trained me, Diane Tupper, I will remember her forever. And boy, did she give me some pearls. But it took me a while to get her to warm up to me because they just thought I didn't have any place without having done med surg for a couple of years. And I'm grateful for all that I learned when I was there. And there's a handful of you all who were there at the same time, a handful of residents who every now and again I bump into, and it's so heartwarming. I feel like we kind of grew up together in a funny kind of way.
Yes. Mm-hmm. We were like little clinicians.
We were.
Like young clinicians, you know?
Like, are we really grown up enough to do this? Is anybody watching? Shouldn't somebody be watching? That whole imposter syndrome?
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh, that's a real thing.
Yeah. No, I specifically remember when I was I don't know if I was I think I was a fourth year medical student, and I talked to one of my interns, and I specifically said, how can I possibly know enough to actually do this job? It's just like, you don't need to know it all right now. You know it a little bit at a time, and that's why you have all these people working with you who can help you.
Yeah.
And even though I think, there's the clinicians who were helping, but clinicians broadened out. Like the nurses were so helpful to that educational experience.
Oh my gosh. Everything. They were everything. So when you see a woman's toes curl, she's probably in transition. That was one of the pearls. And if a woman says the baby's coming, even if you just checked her, the baby's coming. So I carry that wisdom with me still.
I mean, it's such an important thing, and it kind of leads into the work that you've chosen to do. And it really is about not only listening to women, but giving women the space to listen to themselves and to say, I mean, for example, when you're on the labor and delivery floor, a lot of people will sit out the nurse's station and watch the baby's strips. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's just a normal thing. You're like, oh, I could see the baby's heart rate. It looks great. No problem.
Yeah.
But what was really valuable is exactly what you're describing, is to actually be in there with the laboring woman and be like, okay, I know what the strip is showing, but I want to understand how your body is kind of explaining this to you and how your body's explaining this to me as well.
Yeah. I remember charging into Hector Terraza's office. For people who don't know who he is, he was the chief of OBGYN, right? And I remember charging into his office in all my youth and naivete and saying, you have to have those residents sit in entire labor from beginning to end, because they are walking in and they are seeing 2 minutes and they think they know what's going on, and they often don't know what's going on. Like, it has to be a requirement to labor sit one woman beginning to end, because you really can't get a sense in 2 minutes or from the desk about the trajectory of what's happening in the room. And really, it took me many, many years at Miles Memorial Hospital, in a small town hospital with a really low volume of births, before I walked into a room and felt like more or less I could meet whatever was happening without feeling super scared. But it was probably 5 years before I kind of felt no longer like an imposter. And then I only did births for another 2.5. So I wasn't in that space of comfort for very long. But there was a giant parallel between labor and birth and the work that I do now. And it's so similar, right? Any woman in transition is essentially in a labor. There are just different ways to labor. And it has felt that way to me through my entire career. So different kinds of labors with different outcomes. Sometimes you get a baby. With any luck, at a different point in life, you get yourself. But they're intense processes, and it's a space that, for whatever reason, I'm happy and comfortable in. Yeah. I think it stems back to working with women in the outdoors doing physically challenging things, which I did as a kid. Like, I did my first outdoor trip when I was 13 and was hiking on the AT and biking on Nova Scotia and doing physically hard things that I didn't think that I could do, and learned how to do them. And then brought those skills to climbing and mountaineering with women, and then brought those same skills to the labor room, and then brought those skills to women in health crises, and bring those skills to midlife women. It's like the canvas changes, but the paintbrush is similar in some ways.
When you describe this person kind of charging in to see Hector Terraza, it speaks to this important fierceness in you that I think it's a modeling that I think is really important. You provide space, but you're also like, no, we're not going to let other people tell us what we think. We're going to engage ourselves, and we're going to figure out what we think ourselves, and we're going to work on this.
Yeah.
And I kind of love this visual of you sort of hiking side by side up this like kind of steep hill, and you're like, nope, we're going to keep going. Let's go. And you kind of have to be fierce to do that, right?
I think you do. I do think you have to have an inner resiliency that I kind of have always had. I don't know exactly why or where it came from, but it's a darn good thing I've had it through my life, because I've needed it for sure. And it's the kind of resiliency that lets you run your own business, right? Even when you're like, I don't know, it's taking a really long time. I don't know, and all the self-doubt floods in. And I've had it, and I've had it from a kind of weirdly young age. Like, I had troubles sleeping as a kid, and I can remember being like 12 years old and going to a used bookstore in Brookline, Massachusetts, and finding The Relaxation Response by Herbert Benson, right? So at like 12 or 13 years old, I'm reading a book about TM to try and figure out how to help myself sleep. I don't really know where that came from. It just came, and like visiting the Crystal Healing Store and going to yoga in 1985 before everybody and their sister was going to yoga. It's just been my inner compass. I don't know exactly where it came from.
And functional medicine, is absolutely an extension of that.
For sure. Because I think that's one of the things that I loved that drew me to midwifery. I did my midwifery training through Case Western Reserve and an affiliate program it was the Frontier Nursing Service at the time, which was started by a senator's daughter who wanted to care for the Hills people in Kentucky. And so she put nurses on horseback and sent them into the hills. And they would teach public health things like, if you're doing your laundry here, you might want to get your cooking water from over there. And maybe you want to have your outhouse a little bit further away from the river. These are the kinds of things that these nurses taught to the Hills people in Kentucky. And when I went there, I have the most vivid memory of during orientation, there was an instructor drawing a diagram on the board about all the disciplines that midwifery draws from, and we were brainstorming together all the disciplines, and it was nursing and medicine and herbalism and public health and social work and psychiatry. And so among other things, right? And so I felt so at home in that way. It was so much less about the baby part and so much more about the interdisciplinary nature of midwifery. And then when I stopped delivering babies and went to Women in Yarmouth, that was where I was introduced to functional medicine. And the language of functional medicine was everything that I had understood about health, but hadn't had the language for. Because it's never been for me either or. It's never been all natural or medicine. It's just never been that way. I think back to when I was an undergrad, I started at Maine, Orono, and I worked as a counselor in the women's clinic. So this was 1988. And the director at the time was a woman named Ruth Lockhart, who was one of the founding mothers of the Mabel Wadsworth Women's Health Center in Bangor, a feminist health clinic. And at the time, there was no building. At the time, Mabel was still alive, and it was just an idea. And they were running conferences called Health in Our Hands. And I went to, did you go to that conference? Do you remember this at all?
I do remember it. I did not go to this conference, though.
So at this conference, Chris Northrup, who was a Maine-based OBGYN who wrote Women's Bodies, Women's Wisdom, and was one of the founding mothers of Women to Women, who was iconic at the time. And Deb Sewell, who is the founder of Avena Botanicals, right? A beautiful Maine-based herbal apothecary, were on the stage together. And they spoke together. And that was my aha moment of, it's not either or. It is not either or. It is what each woman wants for herself and largely dependent on her circumstances. And that was sort of like, it was so clarifying for me. And functional medicine gave me sort of like the structure to hang those ideas on, which has been amazing and has helped people get better, which is also amazing. And not just by a lengthening list of medications, but by really holding women as they change their lives and refine their lifestyle for their optimal health and wellness. It's quite compelling, right? It's like when women come back, right? So at Women to Women, we were an international icon. Women would show up from all over the world. They'd show up with their giant binders, having been to Mayo, been to Hopkins, been to Dana-Farber, had the executive workups, slide the binder across the table and be like, here's all the testing I've had. The doctors say I'm fine, and I can't make my way through a day at work. And I'm like, okay, wow, I am really not qualified to help you, was the feeling running through my body at the time. And the sort of grounding principle of start with the gut. If you don't know where to start with the gut. I'm like, okay, we're going to start with the gut and have women come back and say, I'm better. Not always 100%. Like I'm not inflating this in any way, but to hold women as they change their life, change what they eat, change how they manage stress, change how they move their body, correct underlying physiologic imbalances, and have them come back and say, I'm better, is pretty compelling.
I think one of the things that I'm struck by is that you wrote this book and you suggested to me before we came on air that it was actually pretty easy to write this book. And I think I look at so yes, it can be easy because all the information is flowing through you. And also, it's like an artist, somebody saying, well, why does that painting cost so much money? You only, it took you 10 minutes to make it. No, it took me my entire career to make it. Mm-hmm. So, this book, sure, you had become so practiced in what you wanted to talk about that it was there. It was just below the surface. But it took you decades to actually to write this book.
I totally hear what you're saying. Like it was only easy because all points led me to there, so to speak, is what I'm hearing you say. Yeah, and I think that that's really true in so many ways. I mean, I have always wanted to write a book since I was a little kid. Was always a dream of mine. And on that first outdoor trip that I mentioned earlier, I started keeping a journal. So I've been a journal writer since the age of 13. And at every opportunity, I would put myself through any writing book program that I could get my hands on, whether it was proprioceptive writing, which was started by a couple of Mainers, or, the Artist's Way, any writing sort of program I could put myself through, I did over the years, through graduate school and delivering babies and having babies and nursing babies and all of that. So, the writing ebbed and flowed over the years, obviously, depending on what was going on in my life, but I always came back to it. And my husband likes to joke about, you have way more than 10,000 hours of practice writing, but it was never for anybody else. It was always just stream of consciousness. I had a great high school English teacher who taught stream of consciousness. And so that was sort of another page in the book, so to speak. And after the passing of my daughter in 2018, a good friend of mine was like, you need to come to this writing group with me that was held locally in our town with a woman named Jeanette Eaton, an amazing, beautiful woman who was trained in the Amherst writing group method. And I was like, okay. And went to that group, and there were sort of exercises at every group. Sometimes they were creative. You could participate. You could write your own thing. You could really do whatever you want. But part of the practice was reading your writing out loud, which was horrifying for me because I had never really shared anything I had written before. And so speaking it out loud was sort of a step into taking writing out of my body and making it available to other people. I had drafted a book, an outline for a book called Inflammation, the Common Denominator, a number of years ago, and had a friend look at it because in functional medicine, the gut is sort of grand central station and the home of inflammation, and inflammation drives everything, right? High blood pressure, chronic fatigue, fibro, cancer, depression, anxiety, right? Inflammation is everywhere. And I really wanted to sort of simplify some of these ideas because in so many ways what I do is not really very complicated. So I had that outline and had brought that outline to the writing group to get some feedback, which was super duper helpful. And then after a session or two of writing group, I don't remember the exact time. It must have then gone into COVID. And I was like, I'm just going to write the book instead of going to writing group. So I see patients 3 days a week. So I've had time. That was part of my sanity of raising kids and practicing. So I had some time on those days. And I was like, I'm just going to sit down for 4 hours on Tuesdays and Fridays, and I'm going to start writing. And found my way to a writing coach in New York City. And so we would Zoom during COVID, and we would talk about what was happening in Maine and what was happening in New York City, which was a super fun lifeline. And she helped me develop a book proposal. And once that proposal sort of took off, then it was about mostly, it felt like filling in the blanks. It was like filling in an outline. And I had so many women ask me, right? So people come to the clinic now and they're like, okay, what do you mean my gut has something to do with my eczema? What do you mean my gut has something to do with my hormone imbalance? Like, where can I read more? Can I read more? Where can I find more information? Is there a book? And there really wasn't an overarching book. And in fact, I was dissuaded from writing the book that I wrote because I was told it's really hard for a person with a small public presence to write a really general book. And I realized that the book publishing industry has done to book writing exactly what healthcare has done to healthcare, which is it has siloed it, right? You've got your endocrinologist, your gastroenterologist, your gynecologist, and you've got, in publishing, you've got your books on hormones and your books on weight loss and your books on digestion. But nobody had written an overarching book about the model. And that was the book that I felt was needed because that was the book that people were asking me for. And the Institute for Functional Medicine has a teaching tool called The Matrix, which is outlined in the book. And I was like, well, there's a book outline. That's easy. Anytime I wasn't sure what to write, I just would sort of close my eyes and ask myself, if a woman was in the office asking you to explain this, what would you say? Because I know what I would say. And then I would just write. exactly what I would say as if I was sitting in the clinic with a woman. And I had done that for long enough that it came relatively easily. And then the other thing with writing the book was not just raising women's awareness about this model and that there's another way of healthcare that does involve with getting to the root cause of what's going on, was to increase access. And I write about that a little bit in the book, that functional medicine has a little bit of a public relations problem as being elitist. And because a lot of the practices are cash practices, a lot of the tests are not covered by insurance. Supplements, we all know, can be a fortune. And again, it's like so much of what I do is so basic. And so I really wanted to give women 5 lifestyle recommendations, 5 nutrition recommendations, 5 nutrient recommendations that they could do for themselves before even getting to a healthcare practitioner's office. Because I'll use my mom as an example. I don't think she'll mind if I throw her under the bus, but she had irritable bowel forever. It was terrible. You know, she was pulling over on the side of the highway because she had to go to the bathroom. And she was an avid diet soda drinker. And I was like, Mom, get off the artificial sweeteners and see what happens. And lo and behold, she was in huge measure better. And that was without taking a pill at all. And so if enough women know, artificial sweeteners, by the way, can cause diarrhea. Maybe you don't have irritable bowel. Maybe you just need to stop artificial sweeteners. That's something someone can do. Like if they feel lousy enough, they're willing to try things that otherwise seem unfathomable. And sometimes they get better. And they never had to see anybody for it. So that was really part of the motivation, was like increasing access and lowering a price point and I often think about that Mabel Wadsworth Women's Health Conference of health in our hands is just like putting health in women's hands. What can we do for ourselves? Are we doing the things that we can do for ourselves? And most of us know we probably could be doing a few other things. Some women are doing all the things and they still don't feel well. And that's a different conversation. And they're out there too.
Well, I hope that people take the time to get your book and read it. It's very readable and it's it is very accessible, actually. And I was, even as somebody who has practiced medicine for a long time, I could see myself sitting down across the, table with a woman and saying, let's look at this book together. I mean, I have some limited information about functional medicine, but I'm not a specialist the way that you are. But I feel like it's a way to create a conversation that women could have with somebody who's not, if they can't access a functional medicine provider for whatever reason, they can utilize it. And it's very practical. But I want to go back to something that really, I think is so specific to this book and to you, and you already mentioned it, so I feel like this is a place of opening. Your daughter, she passed very suddenly and very tragically at a young age. And I have to say, I did not hear about this right away, and then I heard about it later, and I honestly, I grieved for you, like after the fact. I'm sure you were still grieving, and in no way am I comparing my experience to yours. But when you brought this up in the book, I mean, I'm reading this and I've known you for such a long time. And I was like, oh, Carrie, like I felt my heart kind of just stop. I had to stop reading for a minute. And your willingness to bring that into these pages and to speak to your humanity and your experience is so powerful. So it's not simply that you've provided access and information. And I mean, you're also sharing this really important thing that happened to you in a way that I think can be so healing for other people who have had difficulties.
Well, there's this thing that happens that I'm sure you're aware of between people and their healthcare practitioners. And there's an illusion that we are exempt from some of the lessons of humanity. And we are not, And I never want any woman to look at me and think she has it all figured out, because I don't. And when I say with women, I am right there with you, I mean it. Like, I am right there with you. I have my challenges, my heartbreak, my troubles, and they're different. I also have sat with women long enough to know we all have them. No matter how anybody looks, we all have them. And that can be a tremendous point of connection. And it's essential to healing, right? Is to bring those moments to the table. And so I guess maybe I feel like if I can share my vulnerability, maybe that will help someone else be vulnerable and help their healing. And it's lifelong. It doesn't go away. It doesn't go anywhere. She is right here, right now, every day, all the time. And a large reason why I wrote, because I feel like I feel a tremendous responsibility to live my life to the fullest in her honor, because hers got cut abrupt by some measures. Other people might say she lived a lifetime in the 15 years she was alive, because she did. She was full and passionate and loving and all positive things. Some people might say, well, she didn't need 50 or 70 or 80 years to do her life. That's not really a pill I can swallow, but I appreciate that perspective, because she did love life so much. And I feel like it's my responsibility, as I have her boots on earth, to be and do everything I can and to feel everything I can in her honor, because I am still embodied and she is not. So she was a huge motivating factor in writing, and she's a huge motivating factor in my work, and she's a huge motivating factor in my healing. Here in body or not here in body, she's still around. As the physics tenant would say, energy can neither be created nor destroyed. So that's where I land with it, and that helps me get through my days.
So this happened in 2018, and it was a motor vehicle incident. And then we had COVID in 2020. Not that long after this happened.
Yeah.
And whatever structures you probably had in place socially around you, I'm sure some of those disintegrated, leaving you with yourself. And the fact that you kind of channeled this energy towards this book and wrote this, I think it sounds like in her honor in many ways.
Yeah.
I mean, it speaks to this, again, this creativity and this birthing. And I mean, the pain that you went through in her loss, and here you are creating again. And so I've read so many books, and I've read so many kind of health books, but I just think there's something so special about this particular book, because it's almost like it's like we're laboring with you to some extent, that we're there, and you're like, here's the baby. Here she is, isn't she beautiful? And she is.
Well, it's funny, because this, right in this couple of days, is the 1-year birthday of the book. So it's pretty funny. This is our first birthday. Yeah. So we're having our party. Book birthday party.
I love that I love that I got to come to the party.
I mean, some people would say things happen for a reason.
Of course they do.
So,
yes. So if you're a woman in Maine or elsewhere, really, that says, okay, I would like to read this book, but I really want to connect with Carrie and really want to kind of learn more about her. I mean, you do a lot of your work distance-based at this point, right?
I do, but I am limited to caring for women within the state.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Because of, licensing issues.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So there's the book, there's, podcasts, which are it feels fast and furious to me. They're happening a couple a month, and those are all on my website. There's blogging, which happens in varying fits and spurts depending on energy and season and time and other commitments. There's all of that. And I'm thinking about how can I increase access? If people are looking for a functional medicine practitioner, I generally point them to the Institute for Functional Medicine website, and there's a find a practitioner function on their website so they can type in their zip code and see who is in their community who can possibly give them this kind of care. I think that so much is personality. You probably know this, right? It's like about finding the right match and finding the right personality. So not all family practice doctors, not all nurse midwives, and not all functional medicine practitioners are the same. It's so much about finding that individual who you feel like you connect with and who sees you and hears you. So I think just because someone practices functional medicine doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be an awesome fit. You still want to have some discernment and, filter through intuition and make sure that the person that you're working with feels like the right fit for you. So the Institute for Functional Medicine is a good website for people who are wanting to access this kind of practice model. And for me, there's all the typical social media channels for now.
Well, tell people who are listening or watching how they can, what is the best place to go?
Probably carrielevine.cnm on the internet. And then, of course, Instagram and Facebook as well. There's some posting that happens on LinkedIn. I have not forayed into other channels and probably won't. I'm a reluctant social media participator. I sort of accept that that's part of the reality of healthcare and business in the 21st century, but it's not really a place where I'm excited to put too much energy. Other than that, people find me there and find information and help, which is good.
I agree.
Yeah.
I guess I can say that I am proud of you the way that I would be proud of any laboring woman who actually did the work to bring something into the world. Exactly. So I don't think I am being maternalistic or paternalistic by saying I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you.
Thank you, Lisa.
You worked very hard to bring this into the world, and it's just a pleasure to be able to celebrate this on the first birthday of your baby book. Yes, exactly.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming in. I'm Dr. Lisa Belisle, and you have been listening to or watching Radio Maine. Today, my guest has been Carrie Levine, certified nurse midwife, certified functional medicine practitioner, longtime friend and author of Whole Woman Health. So please do read her book. It is just a lot of wisdom, practical knowledge, all kind of rolled into one. Please do check out her website. And she and I continue to connect also through art-related things, which we didn't even get a chance to talk about today. So maybe someday we can convince her to come down to the Portland Art Gallery to one of our openings. And maybe, who knows? Who knows what will happen on the second birthday of the book baby. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.